I'm 82 years old now, and for the first time, I understand why my children grew distant from me. I didn't understand it when it was happening. I didn't understand it when the phone calls became shorter, and I certainly didn't understand it when the silence started lasting longer than the conversations. I understand it now.
But understanding comes late in life. Almost everything important does. I'm not telling this because I expect forgiveness. I don't even know if that's possible anymore. I'm telling it because time has narrowed my world down to memories, and this one keeps returning. Most mornings, I wake up before the sun. Not because I need to, but because my body doesn't know how to rest anymore. The house is quiet, too quiet. There was a time when this same house was loud. Footsteps, arguments, laughter from rooms I pretended not to hear because I was tired. Back then, I thought quiet meant peace. Now I know better. When you're young, distance doesn't look like distance. It looks like independence. It looks like responsibility. It looks like doing what needs to be done. I was a good provider. At least that's what I told myself. I worked long hours. I came home exhausted. I believed that being present in the house was the same as being present in their lives. I didn't disappear. I just faded to the edges. When my children were small, they wanted everything from me: my attention, my approval, my time. They followed me from room to room, asking questions I didn't always answer. I remember thinking they'll understand when they're older. I remember believing there would be time later. Later is a dangerous word. It sounds harmless. It feels infinite. In my 30s, later meant next year. In my 40s, it meant when things settled down. In my 50s, it meant when the kids didn't need me as much. By the time I realized later had arrived, they were already learning how to live without me. I didn't miss everything. That's the part that makes this harder. I was there for birthdays. I showed up to graduations. I sat in folding chairs at school events, checking my watch, thinking about work. From the outside, I looked involved. From the inside, I was somewhere else. I thought love was something you proved through effort, through sacrifice, through making sure the bills were paid and the lights stayed on. No one told me that children don't remember the lights staying on. They remember who sat on the floor with them when they were scared. I don't remember a single conversation where I intentionally pushed my children away. That's the truth. There was no big argument, no dramatic fallout, no moment where doors were slammed and words couldn't be taken back. It was smaller than that, quieter.
It was the times I said, "Not now." The times I listened halfway. The times I assumed they'd come back again tomorrow. Children notice patterns long before parents do. When they were teenagers, I started noticing changes. They stopped telling me things, stopped asking for my opinion. I told myself it was normal. Teenagers pull away. That's what everyone says. But there was something else there. Something settled. Something already decided. They didn't pull away suddenly. They had been slowly learning not to reach. I can still see it now. Moments that meant nothing to me at the time. A school story that trailed off because I didn't look up. A question that wasn't repeated when I answered too quickly. A silence that stayed after I left the room. Back then, silence felt like relief. Now it feels like evidence. I thought being needed less was a sign I'd done my job well. I was wrong. As they grew older, I expected closeness to return on its own. I assumed adulthood would bring understanding, that they'd look back and see everything I'd done. What I didn't understand was this: closeness doesn't return by itself. It has to be maintained the same way it's built. By the time my children had their own lives, they had already learned who I was in their world. Reliable, distant, predictable. I was the man who would help if asked, but not the one they instinctively turned to. That realization didn't come all at once. It crept in. Shorter visits, polite conversations, updates instead of confessions. I noticed I was always hearing about their lives after decisions had already been made. I told myself they were just busy. I told myself many things. The truth is, they weren't pushing me away. They just weren't pulling me closer, and I hadn't taught them how. The turning point wasn't dramatic. It never is. It was a hospital room, a chair pulled too close to a bed, my body finally forcing me to slow down. I remember lying there, staring at the ceiling, realizing how few people I wanted to call, and how unsure I was about whether they'd want to come. They did come. They were kind. They were respectful. But kindness isn't the same as closeness. I watched my children sit by my bed like visitors, not strangers, but not children leaning into a parent either. That's when it became clear. I hadn't lost them suddenly. I had lost them gradually, over decades of being almost present. Recovery brings clarity you don't always want. When you're forced to sit still, memories stop waiting for permission. They arrive whether you're ready or not. I started replaying moments I hadn't thought about in years, and for the first time, I saw them from the other side. I saw how often I chose efficiency over connection, how often I treated conversations like interruptions instead of invitations. I thought I was teaching responsibility. What I was teaching was emotional distance. By the time I was healthy enough to go home, something else had settled in me. Not guilt, something heavier. Acceptance. There are things you can apologize for, and there are things you can only acknowledge. I can't go back and be the father they needed when they needed me. That version of time is gone. I can't ask them to feel differently now without asking them to undo years of adaptation. That wouldn't be fair. People adjust to absence. Once they do, presence feels unfamiliar. If you're listening to this and you still have children who reach for you, hear me carefully. I'm not saying you're doing everything wrong. I'm saying small moments matter more than you think. I thought big gestures would make up for daily distance. They don't. Children don't need perfect parents. They need available ones. I don't say that with bitterness. I say it with clarity earned too late. My children still call. We still talk. But there are walls built from habit that don't come down just because you finally notice them. I've learned to live with that. There's a certain loneliness that comes not from being alone, but from knowing you were present without being known. That's a quiet kind of regret. It doesn't shout, it sits with you. If this sounds familiar, don't panic. Awareness doesn't mean it's over. But don't wait for a dramatic moment to change how you show up. Those moments come when change is no longer possible. I have time now, plenty of it. That's the cruel part. Time is generous when you no longer need it, and stingy when you do. I don't tell this story to be remembered differently. I tell it because someone else still might have a choice.
and because holding truth quietly is heavier than sharing it once. I'm 82 years old. I understand now. That understanding doesn't fix the past, but it does keep me honest in what time I have left. And sometimes that has to be enough.